The ice clinked in Daniel's glass as he swirled his whiskey, staring blankly at the rows of liquor bottles glowing under the club's neon lights. He hadn't planned to be here. This was a place for prowling, for strangers pressing bodies together in the dark, for fleeting moments that burned hot and fast before disappearing into the night. But tonight, something inside him had cracked, and he needed to be anywhere but home. Home! The word felt hollow now. His relationship with Ethan had become a slow suffocation. Dinners eaten in silence. Kisses that were more habitual than passionate. The weight of time pressing them into something functional rather than fiery. He knew love was still there, buried beneath years of routine, but he couldn't remember the last time he had felt truly wanted. Desired. That's what brought him here, to a club he used to visit when he was younger, before Ethan, before commitment dulled the edges of his impulses. He had told himself he was just going for a drink, just to feel the energy of the place again. A harmless indulgence. But as he sat at the bar, nursing his second whiskey, he felt eyes on him. Didn't take you for the brooding type. A smooth voice cut through the hum of music and conversation. Daniel turned, his gaze locking onto the man beside him. Liam. Tall, confident, the kind of man who didn't ask permission before invading someone's space. He had a smirk that hinted at trouble and eyes that held a challenge. His shirt clung to a sculpted frame, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms. Daniel felt the heat of his presence before he even responded. Not brooding, just drinking. Liam chuckled, setting his glass down. Drinking alone in a club full of options? He leaned in slightly, close enough that Daniel caught the scent of his cologne, woodsy, deep, the kind that lingered on skin long after someone was gone. Sounds like you're waiting for something to happen. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head with a half-smile. And you think you're that something? I think I might be. Liam's fingers lightly tapped the rim of his glass, gaze never breaking. Unless you tell me to fuck off. Daniel should have. He should have laughed, finished his drink, and gone home to Ethan. But he didn't. Because something about Liam, the ease in his confidence, the unspoken promise in his stare, ignited something in him. Something dangerous. Didn't say that, did I? Daniel murmured. Liam grinned, slow and knowing. Didn't think so. A slow tension settled between them, electric and undeniable. It had been so long since Daniel had felt this pull, this intoxicating sense of being seen, of being wanted without expectation or history. So what's your story? Liam asked, shifting so that their legs almost brushed. Guys like you don't just end up here alone unless there's a reason. Daniel hesitated. A part of him wanted to lie, to say he was single, unattached, just another man looking for a good time. But the words that came out were different. I have a boyfriend. Liam raised an eyebrow, but he didn't pull away. If anything, his smirk deepened. And yet, here you are, drinking, talking to me. A flicker of guilt stabbed at Daniel's ribs, but he ignored it. Maybe I just like good conversation. Liam's gaze dropped to Daniel's lips before meeting his eyes again. Is that what we're having? Daniel's pulse kicked up, his fingers tightening around his glass. The music pulsed around them, bodies moving in the dim light. And yet this moment felt more intense than anything else in the room. He could still walk away. He could finish his drink, make an excuse, leave before this became something irreversible. But he didn't move, because for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt awake. Daniel knew he should leave. Every second he stayed was a choice, a deliberate step closer to something he couldn't take back. And yet, when Liam slid onto the stool beside him, radiating confidence and the scent of dark musk, Daniel didn't move. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, feeling the burn travel down his throat, grounding him for a fleeting moment. You always this persistent? Liam chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his own glass. Only when I see something worth pursuing. His eyes held steady, scanning Daniel with a kind of intensity that was both unnerving and addictive. And you? Do you always entertain strangers in bars while your boyfriend waits at home? Daniel's stomach twisted, a cocktail of guilt and arousal. Ethan. The thought of him flickered like a faulty light bulb, present, but dimming fast under the heat of Liam's gaze. He exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know what I'm doing. Liam leaned in slightly, voice low. I think you do. His fingers grazed the edge of Daniel's knee. A fleeting touch that sent a jolt up his spine. You're tired of playing it safe. Daniel didn't respond. Couldn't. Because it was true. The past year with Ethan had been comfortable. Predictable in the worst way. Their passion had dulled to something routine. Their intimacy reduced to scheduled touches and half-hearted kisses. Love was still there, but no longer set his skin on fire. And now, here was Liam, an inferno waiting to consume him. Liam drained the last of his drink and pushed his empty glass aside. Come dance with me. Daniel let out a dry laugh. I don't dance. Liam stood anyway, offering a hand. Then stand close and let me do the work. Daniel hesitated, but the pull was too strong. He let Liam lead him onto the dance floor, the bass vibrating through his chest as bodies moved in sync with the music. The club was alive in a way Daniel hadn't been in a long time. Flashes of color, heat, and desire saturating the air. Liam turned to face him, closing the space between them. Hands found Daniel's hips, fingers pressing just enough to guide. Their bodies aligned, a slow, deliberate rhythm forming between them. Daniel's breath hitched as Liam's thighs slid between his, the friction sending a wave of heat straight to his core. You're tense, Liam murmured against his ear, voice like silk. Relax. Daniel swallowed hard. His hands hovered uncertainly before settling on Liam's waist. The moment he touched him, something inside him snapped. Liam tilted his head, lips brushing dangerously close to Daniel's jaw. That's it. The music pulsed, but Daniel barely heard it. He was hyper-aware of Liam, of the strength in his touch, the heat radiating off his skin, the way his mouth hovered just out of reach, taunting. This is a bad idea, Daniel muttered, but he didn't step away. Liam smirked. Then why are you still here? Daniel had no answer. Liam's hands slid lower, fingers grazing just beneath the hem of Daniel's shirt, fingertips pressing into bare skin. The touch was electric, a dangerous temptation. Tell me to stop, Liam whispered. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He should. He needed to. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he exhaled, tilting his head just slightly. An invitation, silent but understood. Liam's lips ghosted over his neck, not quite kissing, just enough to make Daniel shiver. His grip tightened on Liam's waist, anchoring himself even as he felt like he was slipping into something irreversible. Then Liam's mouth finally met skin, a slow, deliberate press of lips against his throat. Daniel's eyes fluttered shut, a quiet curse escaping under his breath. He was falling, and he wasn't sure he wanted to stop. Daniel didn't know when his body stopped resisting, when his mind stopped screaming at him to walk away. All he knew was that Liam's mouth was on his skin, his breath was hot against his throat, and his hands gripped his waist with a confidence that made Daniel feel wanted in a way he hadn't in years. The club had faded. The music, the flashing lights, the bodies around them, they no longer mattered. There was only Liam. Liam pulled back just enough to look at him, eyes dark with intent. Come with me. Daniel should have said no. He should have stepped back, shaken off this heat, this pull, and gone home. But the moment Liam's fingers laced with his, guiding him through the crowd, Daniel followed. They wove through the club, past dancers lost in their own pleasures, past the bar where Daniel had sat only an hour ago, convincing himself he was just here for a drink. Now, he was walking towards something he couldn't undo. A hallway, dimly lit and tucked away from the main floor, stretched before them. Liam pressed a hand against a sleek black door, pushing it open to reveal a private lounge, a space designed for quiet conversations, for stolen moments away from the chaos. But Daniel knew exactly what this was. A room built for secrecy. The door clicked shut behind them. The low hum of bass still vibrated through the walls, but it was distant now, a reminder that the world outside still existed even as Daniel felt himself slipping into something else entirely. Liam didn't hesitate. His hands found Daniel's collar, fingers tracing the buttons of his shirt before popping the first one open. Last chance, he murmured, voice thick with promise. Tell me to stop, and I will. Daniel's breath hitched. He thought of Ethan, of their apartment, of the quiet way they moved around each other these days, of the way his touch no longer made Daniel's pulse race. He thought of the version of himself who would have walked away. But that version didn't exist anymore. Instead of answering, Daniel closed the space between them, crashing his lips against Liam's. The moment their mouths met, it was wildfire, burning, consuming, nothing soft about it. Liam took control instantly, backing Daniel against the sleek leather couch in the center of the room. Daniel let him. Clothes loosened, hands roamed. Liam was relentless, fingers tracing over Daniel's skin, learning him like a man discovering something forbidden for the first time. Every touch, every press of lips against his jaw, his collarbone, his stomach, Daniel felt himself unraveling beneath it. Liam's mouth found his ear. "You like this?" he whispered. Daniel barely recognized his own voice when he exhaled. Yes. The word sealed it. Liam's hands were everywhere, gripping, teasing, pushing Daniel to the edge of something dangerous. Daniel surrendered to it, his body betraying every lingering shred of guilt. Because in this moment, there was no past, no future, just this. He barely registered when Liam's fingers hooked into his waistband, dragging fabric lower. And suddenly, Daniel was bare. A shuddered breath left him, and for a moment, the weight of what he was doing threatened to crush him. He should feel shame. He should feel regret. But all he felt was Liam's hands on his skin, his lips marking a path down his chest, his voice murmuring sinful things against his flesh. Daniel let his head fall back, surrendering completely. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The room was quiet except for the distant thump of bass bleeding through the walls. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, his shirt unbuttoned, his skin still warm from Liam's touch. His breath was slowing, but his thoughts were racing. Liam stood a few feet away, buttoning his own shirt with a satisfied smirk. "No regrets, right?" Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because regret wasn't the right word for what twisted inside him. It wasn't just guilt either. It was something deeper, something uglier. The realization that he had wanted this, that he had chosen this. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A familiar name flashed across the screen. Ethan. A lump formed in his throat. He could already picture him, sitting on their couch, probably half asleep with the TV playing softly in the background. Maybe he had fallen asleep waiting for Daniel to come home. Maybe he still believed Daniel was the kind of man who wouldn't do this. Liam sat beside him, watching him closely. "You're thinking about him." It wasn't a question. Daniel clenched his jaw. "I should go." Liam let out a short laugh, stretching an arm across the back of the couch. "Of course you should." He studied Daniel, eyes sharp, amused. "But you won't tell him." Daniel turned his phone over in his hands, staring at the dark screen. "No." The word came out quieter than he expected. Liam leaned in slightly, voice low. "Because you'll do it again." Daniel's pulse jumped. He turned to look at Liam, ready to deny it, ready to push back, but the certainty in Liam's eyes stopped him. Because deep down, Daniel knew the truth. This wasn't just about tonight. It wasn't just about Liam. It was about something inside Daniel, something hungry, something starved, that he hadn't been able to name until now. And now that he had tasted it, he wasn't sure he could stop. Liam reached out, tracing a slow line down Daniel's forearm. "You'll leave, and you'll feel guilty. You'll go home, kiss your boyfriend, pretend this never happened." He tilted his head, watching Daniel like a predator who already knew his prey's next move. "But you'll think about me, about this." His lips curled slightly. "And one night, when the silence at home gets too heavy again, you'll come looking for me." Daniel swallowed hard. "You sound so sure." Liam grinned, standing up and fixing his collar. "I don't have to be." He walked to the door, pausing with one hand on the frame. "You already know I'm right." And with that, he was gone. Daniel sat there for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. The club still pulsed outside. People still drank, still danced, still whispered promises in the dark. Nothing had changed, except Daniel. He buttoned his shirt, ran a hand over his face, and finally stood. His legs felt unsteady, his body thrumming with the remnants of Liam's touch. He made his way back through the club, past the bar where his glass still sat half full. The night air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside. The city buzzed around him, cars passing, people laughing, neon signs flickering above his head. Everything felt too sharp, too real. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan. "Hey babe, you okay?" Daniel exhaled slowly, his fingers hovering over the screen before he finally typed back. "Yeah, be home soon." He slid the phone into his pocket and started walking. But even as he moved toward home, toward Ethan, he knew a part of him was still back in that room with Liam, and he wasn't sure it would ever leave.